What's something your family did that you assumed everyone's family did until someone looked horrified? Story 1. The only computer in our house was in my room, so it was common when my dad thought I was asleep for him to come in and look at. I could see it across the room, but because his eyesight was poor, I don't think he understood how clear it was. I don't know that I necessarily thought it was normal, but I didn't think it was weird since it was the only computer. It just made me intensely uncomfortable and wish he'd wait until I was out of the house. When I moved out, I realized how truly unhinged it was, and it also made me take second looks at other things he did that I thought was okay. A lot of them were not. Story 2. Having an extremely antagonistic relationship with a sibling, like, he chased me down the street with a knife kind of thing. Parents didn't really punish him or anything, so I thought it was a bit much and kinda scary, but all siblings fight, right? Wasn't until I made a friend with a similar-aged sibling and saw that they could just hang out that I realized our dynamic was very. Anyway, everyone in the family still brushes that under the rug, and I get accused of being purposefully negative or fixated on the past if I mention any of these incidents without making them a joke. Story 3. Make you eat dinner in the bathtub as a punishment. Honestly, wasn't even traumatizing if we couldn't eat without spilling our food everywhere. They sent us to eat dinner in the bathtub. Story 4. Both parents walked around naked, after the shower. Nudity was so non-sexual. Didn't realize that wasn't the norm until someone said something like it'd be so gross weird to see your parents naked, and I was like, nah, it's not really a big deal, and realized everyone was staring. Story 5. Whenever my dad did something wrong, like coming home drunk, me, my little siblings, and my mom would have to go out in the streets in the middle of the night barefoot to go to my cousin's house for the night. I used to think it was normal somehow, no idea on how honestly. This was years ago. I was around 8 or 9. Story 6. Lighthearted response. My husband is Greek, and his mom had that one room that kids were not allowed to go in. Special guests only. Couches and chairs were covered in plastic, so were the lamps. It was a sitting room for entertainment. While this is not normal per se, he has met other immigrant families whose moms had that one room. Dark response. My sister's best friend and her sister thought that generational abuse by their grandfather, father, and uncles was normal and just something every woman and girl in families had to endure. The day a couple of us girls told them otherwise, it was nothing but tears and hugs all around. I will always applaud these two young girls for getting facts involved, especially because my sister's bestie went to an awful foster home before my dad became her guardian. They also both broke the cycle of abuse and became great and very supportive moms. Story 7. My mom was extremely paranoid about fire, so every night everything got unplugged. So as a child at my first sleepover, and wanting to be a helpful guest, at bedtime I went around unplugging things. The lamps, the TV, the stereo, the washer, the dryer. My friend's mother thought I was insane. Story 8. I was telling the story about how the steel market dropped out of Pennsylvania and there was no work. After unemployment ran out, my dad and his best friend got on motorcycles to leave the car with us and drove until they found work. No destination, one loaf of bread, a roll of bologna, and gas money. No idea where they would even stay. They wound up in North Carolina. When they saved up enough for one used RV between two families they sent for us and we followed them, lived on a campground until they got enough money up for rent. As I'm telling this story, someone was like, "So you were homeless as a child?" I just stammered, no, I mean we didn't have a home, we weren't homeless. And just stood there as I realized I'd been homeless as a child. We were fine, just no home. He even stole chickens from a next-door farmer because we hadn't had meat in a month. When he got paid, he stuffed an envelope with cash and put it in that guy's mailbox with just a note, "For chickens." Turns out there was a whole set of poverty rules I hadn't learned that I'd internalized. If you're invited for dinner, never ask for a second helping. You didn't know if you were eating their meal plan for the next day. Story 9. In high school I had two friends over downstairs. In my room, one, Suzanne, was from Quebec and didn't speak much English. I went upstairs for something and accidentally bumped into my toddler brother, and he fell on his butt. My abusive, alcoholic father started screaming at me as usual. I quickly told him that there were friends in my room and he immediately shut up and walked away. I went back downstairs and Suzanne was hiding in my closet, extremely frightened at the chaos, which to us was par for the course. Story 10. Whenever we did something bad, my dad would punish us by making us do these physical things like holding our ears, squatting, and jumping around, squatting while leaned against a wall, and just random as things. Turns out they were punishments he endured while in the Korean Army. My friends looked horrified when I told them. Story 11. Put the kids in the hatchback. My father had a 2-seat sport car. He and his girlfriend got the seats. Me and my friend got the trunk. My friends were horrified then. I am horrified now. Story 12. Being like a servant to your parents. My mother would pick me up from the babysitter after she got off work, get home, go to her room and watch TV until she went to sleep, or if I had an activity, she'd take me and all but otherwise was watching TV. If she wanted a can of pop from the fridge or a snack, she'd yell, "Utter solitude, bring me." If she had something to say to me, "Utter solitude, get your in here." Like middle schoolish was when I'd hang out at other kids' houses, rode the bus to school, so I could just go over to So and SOS house, and it blew my silky mind that other people's parents got their own drinks and didn't scream all the time. Story 13. I didn't realize it was uncommon to need to run out of your home and hide in a treehouse when your brother acts up. I was an adult talking to a therapist about my brother's antics when she said, "Hey, it's nice you have empathy for your brother, but he's quite mentally unwell, not to mention extremely abusive and cruel." I haven't spoken to my brother in over a decade. but am aware he's been nicknamed the benevolent sociopath in his town because he's so polite and friendly until he's very much not. Those who know him well are all a bit shocked he hasn't ended up in prison or a mental hospital. Story 14 Rough housed with our dad. I'm not talking just normal wrestling around, I'm talking getting thrown several feet in the yard, seizure lock around the waist preventing the ability to breathe, but also just generally rough playing. My dad has broken several couches from slamming us on them. As we got older the wrestling got more intense. In high school he would try to put me in handcuffs. As a resisted arrest he was a trooper. This became a real no-holds-barred drill for him as it could really help him. We then started to have him wear his duty belt with a blue gun in the holster, and my number one goal was to take his gun. These drills would leave us both covered in cuts, bruises, rug burns. I've told people about how hard we would go, even as young kids, and people say that's abuse, but not once was I ever scared of him, or I wasn't having fun. I trusted him full-heartedly to not hurt me, and he never did. To this day, I have a closer relationship with him than most men I know have with their fathers. Edit. To further describe that nature of our relationship and trust, one of my favorite memories as a kid was when I was 11 and finally convinced my dad to pepper spray me after asking for it since I was 8. Afterwards, he was so impressed with how I conducted myself through the pain that he gifted me an extra can of mace that he had. He said I handled it better than most grown men had seen go through the academy. To this day it remains one of the largest busts to my confidence I ever had at a single moment. Story 15 A lot of people tend to reuse their bath towels for a few days before they put it in the dirty clothes. My mom thought that was disgusting and decided that bath towels would get washed after every single use. It was my job to do the laundry every day, so I was told I needed to be doing 3 loads of laundry every single day, a lights load, a darks load, and a load of towels. My parents also insisted that it was normal that the oldest kid in residence was basically the family servant. They were both the youngest oopsie kids in bigger families that had money and hired household help. I truly think they didn't know how to parent through any other way than delegation. My parents also thought that if we went to any kind of a family event like a wedding or a funeral, the oldest girl, usually me, had to take care of every child present, even if that kid had no real connection to me, so the adults could relax and talk. Not sure if that's just a boomer thing or if it's because I grew up in a super religious community where treating older girl children like that was encouraged. Even though my parents aren't religious, they were more than happy to buy into that mindset. I feel like I spent my life being told I was a lazy, useless piece of any time I wasn't cleaning or taking care of somebody else's kids. I even got in trouble for doing my own homework instead of helping my brother and sisters with theirs. I'm almost 50 and I still have issues with feeling selfish or bad if I am not cleaning or doing something for other people. Story 16 8 Sautéed stinging nettles. I realize city people didn't eat them, but even country folks think they're just a weed. They're so tasty, and the stalks have a fiber inside them that's as fine as linen. Story 17 I grew up upper middle class, but my dad came from a working class background and my mother was lower middle class. They didn't want me and my siblings to be out of touch with reality, so they had us do things like clean the house, get jobs at 16, and have extracurricular activities. They didn't buy us cars, and we wouldn't get birthday or Christmas presents after the age of 10. On Christmas, we would go work at a homeless shelter, and every 3 months, we had to donate clothes. We thought this was normal, but when we'd tell our friends and classmates, they'd think it was insane. They had nannies and housekeepers and cars and pretty much didn't have to do anything they didn't want to. They didn't have jobs and had no responsibilities. If they failed a class, their parents would make a big deal out of it, then they'd pass. A lot of them got pulled over as teens for drinking and driving, but then it would kind of just go away and there wouldn't really be any consequences. For a long time, I didn't know that being caught drinking and driving was a big deal. Not that I would ever do it, but since my friends and classmates got barely a slap on the wrist, I thought it was on the same level as littering. It wasn't until a guy I knew from a lower middle class family got a DUI and his whole life was fed up that I learned how serious it was. So mine is the opposite from a lot of people. We were raised as an average family to the best of my parents' abilities, and the friends we had thought we were weird because they grew up as typical upper middle class and upper class families. Story 18 Not a big deal, but just something I thought was weird. My family talks with our mouth full, not completely full, mind you, not to the point where it's unintelligible, but where there's a small amount in your mouth not impeding speech and obviously not showing it to everybody, made it so that there's fewer pauses in the conversation. Anyway, found out that you're supposed to swallow all your food before talking, so now I have to make a conscious effort not to talk with my mouth full. Story 19 My mom was uber healthy, and raised us to be as such, but she took it to a whole other level. Birthday cakes weren't even immune, we weren't allowed sugar additives, and I mean that. She would form mashed dates into a cake-shaped block, wrap it with plastic wrap, and then decorate the block with real frosting so it would look nice and normal for pictures. Then, after pictures, she would peel the frosting off without even allowing us a lick of it. The first every time I explained that, I got a horrified look. Another thing done was when animals got old or sick, my parents would just expedite their death in the coldest ways. We had a ferret that was getting old, and my parents buried it alive. It dug its way free, and they reburied it. When our baby guinea pig got sick with an upper respiratory infection, instead of getting it meds, they put it in the garage to let it die slowly. I remember sitting with it so it wouldn't get lonely. I could hear it gasping. Pet rats, left on the side of the road when one of them got a tumor and the other was left with it for company. They were so nonchalant about it's just an animal, and this is just what you do. I was both bewildered and relieved when I learned it wasn't normal. Because even if some of their nonchalance had rubbed off on me, and I put great effort into undoing that, learning my heart was wanting and willing to take care of an animal to the end of its life, and waste money on it, because I loved that little life and was responsible for it. Story 20. The way my sister treated me. I really thought it was normal for an older sibling to hate their younger sibling and make no effort to hide it, until I was about 14. I jokingly told my friend she didn't need to pretend to be nice to her brother just because I was there. She asked what I meant. Cue horrified expression when I explained. So yeah, turns out not everyone tries to kill their sibling. Who knew? Story 21. Not as serious as others here, but having a family bath towel like you would a communal hand towel. I never thought it weird until a friend of mine came over. She asked me which towel she could use and I was like, oh, any of the ones hanging. She was a very close friend and had a few follow-up questions. Now that I have my own home and family, every member has their own towel set. Story 22. At my grandparents' house there was a glass on the mantle that we had to keep alcohol in or else the ghost of the previous owner would make our appliances not work. It wasn't until middle school or so when I mentioned that as one of my childhood chores that people informed me that most people don't believe in ghosts, much less have chores based around appeasing them. Story 23. Pretty well ignored each other, but especially me. I spent nearly all of my childhood alone entertaining myself. Turns out, most parents actually do things talk with their kids, working on not isolating myself, but it's a daily struggle. Story 24. After spreading margarine on your toast, to wipe any leftover spread from your knife back into the tub, even if it's full of toast crumbs, because not wiping it back onto the tub is wasteful. Story 25. When we had wet shoes, my mom would always put them in the oven. I have no idea if it was on or not. I'd be embarrassed to ask because I'd then have to admit that I'm asking because when I stayed with my host family in Germany and did it, they thought I was absolutely insane. This was over 25 years ago. Story 26. My parents having two entirely different personalities, the public one and the private one. I thought all adults were like that. In public, my mother was a pillar of the community, scout den mother, crossing guard, community center volunteer, PTO member. At home, she beat the out of me and my siblings on a regular basis. She had violent outbursts that could be triggered by anything or nothing at all. She'd smack the out of one of us just because she didn't like the way we looked at her. She backhanded me one time because I was whistling while walking across the porch. She asked me what and I was so happy about. I said I was having a good day. She slapped me upside my head and asked if I was still having a good day. People would tell me all the time how nice and how charming my father was. And to everyone else he was at home. He flipped a bed and beat the out of my brother because he took $1 that didn't belong to him. He slapped me so many times, catching my lip with his wedding ring. I still have a scar there from it. When my sister was in kindergarten, he beat her so badly that she had to be kept out of school because they couldn't hide the bruises and welts. Story 27. Everyone has 50 trash bags of beer cans on the porch. Right. Also famously, as a toddler, pointed to a crushed beer can my mom and I passed in the street and said, Papa. Story 28. Learned it is not normal to have clear memories of mom and grandma wiping my for me. Honestly, I think it's why I had severe constipation issues until I was a teenager. Being 6 and screaming for someone to come wipe my just wasn't good for mental development. I don't want to open that can of worms, but I always wonder why they let it go on for so long. Story 29. While I didn't think everyone's family did it, I seriously underestimated the effect of my mother shouting almost non-stop when I was a teenager. To me it had become a background noise and I was a bit surprised when my friends looked horrified during a birthday party at home. It was a oh yeah that's kind of up actually moment. Story 30. Everyone in my family goes to the bathroom with the door wide open. I didn't realize how weird it was until I grew up and didn't live at home anymore. They still do it now in my family home, even with guests over at the house like my boyfriend. It is so embarrassing. I don't know of any other family that does that. Story 31. Everyone had to pee before bed. 6 brothers. We all had to pee before bed and had to check on each other. After a while we'd just pee 2 or 3 at a time. When everyone was done we would flush and dad would call out good night and we'd go to bed. To this day I'm really thirsty around 6 p.m. Story 32. When my mom was upset with work or anything really, she'd slam doors, throw things, and scream at us for anything, just to yell. She'd get so upset with us or my dad, she'd pack a bag and say she was leaving then come back later and a couple days later like nothing happened and accepted us to cling to her. What really messed me up was she'd always take my baby brother with her and not the rest of us. When I started dating, I did this slamming doors, yelling, throwing things, say I'm leaving then come back accepting us to act like nothing happened. All because I had a bad day or was irritated. I had to unlearn this in my 20s. Story 33. Dropping me and my brother off at different random churches when we were like 5 to 7 years old. We would get dropped off around 8:30 a.m. and picked up at noon every Sunday. No idea what my parents did. I guess they just wanted us out of their hair. Story 34. Yelling if they were mad. And these were the adults. Thought that's how all families communicated until I married into a normal family. My partner witnessed a screaming match between my dad's wife and her then 30-year-old son. His family has never done that to each other, much less in front of others. One time my dad's wife yelled at my partner and I got upset at her. I told him that I wouldn't let her get away with talking like that to him. He asked me why I wasn't mad when she did the same to me. Then it clicked that I thought it was okay for her to speak like that to me. Story 35 At my house we never sat at the table and shared a meal. My mom would make dinner in the afternoon, leave it on the stove and you could come and get it. My dad would just eat standing there at the stove. My brothers took their plates to their bedrooms and I ate in front of the TV. We never said grace, just grabbed our food and scattered. Story 36 Mom had us kids bathe on Sundays. Only Sundays. Also, both my parents were heavy smokers that always lit up in the house. I grew up in the 90s where cigarettes were rampant and smoking inside was the norm. Looking back, I can only begin to imagine how bad my sister and I smelled. It's no wonder the other kids avoided me at school. Story 37 Our dad drinking road beers with us in the car. I don't remember him ever being noticeably drunk, but he was almost always be drinking beer while driving. Story 38 Oh my god, I was just talking about this last night. Whenever an adult in my family would help change the clothes of a child in my family, like pull a sweater over their head, they would say ski in the kitty inexplicably. My family loves animals, not skinning them. I thought this was a normal, common phrase, until I was working at an emergency animal hospital watching a veterinary technician take the sweater off of a chihuahua and helping. I said skin the kitty. And the room went quiet and horrified. Apparently, it's not a common phrase. Story 39 My brother's father-in-law used to 100 think it was normal in public, or private. He was non-discriminatory about it to lick his plate after eating. He just completely thought it was socially acceptable. Story 40 I was weirded out and asked a friend in primary school why their house was so quiet at night. Turns out I'd never heard what a house is like when everyone was sleeping, only insane screaming at each other every night. Story 41 My dad would walk around, point his index finger to his temple, and go click bang bang. I should shoot us all. None of us kids said or did anything because we couldn't, but he did it in front of other people that came for visiting, and one time a gentleman asked me if he might shoot us, and I was so shocked that someone would actually say that out loud. Me dad might shoot us, even though we would tremble when he did this, claiming that if we were all dead, we would go to heaven anyway. There is a religious belief among some extreme religious persons that killing women and children is okay because it simply ensures their entry into heaven, therefore they actually did a good thing. Story 42 My family would watch TV while flossing together at night. If someone would get up to get floss, they'd get the spool so everyone could floss and pass it around. A new fiancé was visiting and the floss pass started. He looked genuinely horrified and uncomfortable. Story 43 Wash out our plastic bags, turn them inside out to dry, and use until they fell apart. Rinse off aluminum foil and fold it neatly. Rinse out paper towels and hang them to dry, but rinsing out our coffee filters and reusing them raised the most eyebrows. Story 44 Knife Growing up, my parents ordered pizza every Saturday night and never tipped the delivery guy, never. Plus, they were downstairs in the family room and us kids were upstairs in the living room by the front door, so when the pizza came, we gave the dude exact change, like, not even a few cents extra. My mom gave exact change to give them, no tip. I remember the look on their face but didn't think anything of it because, I'm a kid. It wasn't until I was a little older and a friend stayed over and they said you don't give the guy a tip, that I realized that's what you're supposed to do. Story 45 We were in If It's Yellow Be Mellow family, which I thought was standard procedure everywhere until my friend's mom called me disgusting for not flushing when I was over at their house. Story 46 I was ugly and a nerd because I hadn't lost my V-card at 15 years old. And I must also be attracted to ugly nerd people because none of my friends had lost their V-cards by 15 either. Took me getting to uni to realize my family was toxic AF. Story 47 My mum used to wash my face with cold water in the morning to wake me up. Now I'm older I enjoy splashing my face with ice cold water in the morning. Apparently that's not a normal thing to do to kids. Story 48 When my mom was upset she'd take everything from every room in the upstairs and throw it down the stairs, and then to really prove the point, open the front door and start throwing things onto the lawn. Then when she was done we had to pick up all the debris and she'd blame us for any damage we made her do to the walls, stairs or paint. I thought parents just did that until I was about 16. Story 49 Not horrified but shocked. My mom is a fabulous cook and she used to cook delicious dinners every night. Our neighbor's kids always wanted to stay for dinner because she gave everyone including kids their own steak, a few pieces of chicken if the kid wanted it, or turkey, dressing, potatoes and gravy etc. TBH we had a farm so she grew most of our food and there was lots. We were the shocked ones to find out our snobba neighbors who had the nicest house on a hill and never let anyone forget it, fed their kids a scoop of pasta and carrot sticks if they were lucky. Their kids were always sneaking into their pantry and stealing raw hamburger helper or big score raisins. Then they started sneaking food out of our fridge and our freezer. We went out of town for a few days and came back to find a bedroom window ajar and a well-worn path made by sneakers across the house to our freezer, which when opened had bags previously filled with cookies with only 3 left. Maybe they'll think that's how many they put in there, and big gaps where my mom had put her homemade bread and pies. Story 50 When I was a teen and my parents would get into arguments, my dad would tell my mom things like I don't need you, I can move out right now and be just fine. And I'm only with you because you pay the bills. He didn't work by choice. He would point to the stacks and stacks of boxes he kept in case he needed them, and say look I can move at any time, I'm ready to move whenever. He would sit there and yell at her for like 20 minutes straight, and when she would go to their room and close the door to try and escape he would follow to yell at her more. He would push her buttons until she yelled back at him, begging him to leave her alone, to just drop it, that he was right she was wrong, he was smart she was stupid etc etc etc. then head slam the door and leave her in there and come into my room to tell me to pack up all my stuff we were leaving. To be prepared to grab my essentials because he couldn't live like this anymore and he wasn't going to leave me behind. If I didn't start packing quick enough he would start yelling at me too. I would pack a go bag and within an hour he would be over it and back to whatever hobby he had at the time, acting like nothing ever happened. When I moved in with my wife I tried to keep the boxes and she had to help me unpack all that and assure me it wasn't normal. People don't keep 10-foot walls of boxes and threaten to move at the drop of a hat. She also helped me realize that being screamed and yelled at every single day isn't normal either. Story 51. My husband's family uses a cheese slicer on the stick of butter to get butter for their bread. They also didn't know they were all lactose intolerant until his generation of cousins reached their mid-20s and they realized or were told that having raging diarrhea every day was not normal. Their parents' mom, dad, aunts and uncles still don't agree that they are lactose intolerant because we're farm people. Note that despite the shocking amount of butter these people inhale on a daily basis, even the ones who don't spontaneously shoot it out of their asses again, are all healthy and fit due to some magical Nordic metabolism genes. Meanwhile, I will gain 10 kilograms just looking at a teaspoon of butter. Story 52. This actually just happened when I was explaining to my husband about the rope you keep under your bed so you can tie the rope around the bed, pop out the screen of your bedroom window and cascade down the roof of our second-story home. We practiced this regularly from the ages of 5 to 16 just in case someone broke into the home. I thought everyone had a rope under the bed and did that. When my husband and I were watching Red Letter Media they were watching some doomsday Crime Stoppers movie about preparing for the worst and keeping your family safe. I was like yes, I remember the rope under the bed and my husband was like what? I'm still in shock that wasn't normal for other people's childhoods lol. Story 53. My mom used to frequently throw adult temper tantrums all the time. When I was a kid I didn't realize it was abnormal for an adult to do that. When I got older I realized she is scary. She was also physically abusive and so was my stepdad, but her tantrums were scary. Story 54. I don't know that I assumed everyone's family did it, but it just never struck me how much they didn't until I had a casual conversation with my husband. He asked me once what I used to do after school when I was in junior high and high school. I just casually said, oh, I usually had to rush home and watch my dad to make sure he didn't kill himself until my mom could get home from work. My dad suffered from depression but wouldn't get treated for it. He looked so horrified. My brain finally caught up, and I asked, oh, why, what did you do? Went to the movies or hung out at the mall? Oh. Right, my experience wasn't the norm. The number of things I've just casually thrown at my husband and rocked his entire world. Story 55. I thought everyone ran a long orange extension cord from the old shop next to their house to power their fans, TV and charge mom's cell phone. Also thought everyone walked 30 feet from their house to use the bathroom of an old shop. After noticing a few confused looks from my friends and my teacher pulling me aside, I learned that we squatted in an old 80s camper with no electricity, water or AC and it wasn't normal. I told my teacher I was kidding that it was a dream and kept my mouth shut after that. I believe I was 7 and in second grade. Good times ill. Story 56. My family would casually walk around naked, so I knew what my dad and brother looked like in their birthday suit. Never thought anything of it until I was around 15-16 and the question came up in a class and the look people gave me told me that it's something I shouldn't be seeing. Story 57. Hey race. My funny story that always gets me weird looks. I grew up in a small mountain town where the population is either retired or on drugs. I'm sure there are nice people in between, but in general, that was the vibes. Growing up, I thought adults didn't have to sleep as much as kids did. Anytime I woke up in the middle of the night, my parents and the other adults they had over were still up. If I stayed the night at a friend's house, it was the same. Her parents would be up late. Sometimes my dad would stay over too. How fun. Then I moved to a much nicer town. I was so surprised when my new friend's parents went to bed at 10 during a sleepover. I joked they must be really tired, and she laughed. A few years later it clicked that in my old town, my parents and their friends were getting high all night. Shortly after moving my dad kicked it and started maintaining a regular schedule, and that's when it started to make sense. Story 58. We used to keep butter in a cabinet. Like not the fridge, just vibes and room temp dairy. I mentioned it once and my friend looked at me like I confessed to murder. Story 59. I grew up very Mormon. I remember when I was grade school age learning the story of when Abraham was going to sacrifice Isaac at God's command and being taught at the ripe old age of like 9, that I should also be willing to kill my loved ones or allow them to kill me without self-defense, or to do any other similarly horrible thing if God commanded it, and that I would be a sinner who wouldn't join my family in the celestial kingdom. Mormon heaven is complicated, but basically celestial kingdom is the best heaven, and if you don't make it you're cut off from God and looked down on. Even though you're still technically in heaven lol. It was also normal in my home to be told off for things like not wearing a bra under my shirt, even PJs. In front of my father brothers once I actually had breasts. BC attempts them or whatever similar creepy BC. That's just how men's brains work and they can't help it. Really took me to adulthood to realize how horrifying most people find that notion. Including most men, who also are offended by the notion that they are biologically wired to be such helpless horndogs that they can't help thinking pervy about their own daughters or sisters BC of their clothing choices. Which is fair. I am now similarly offended on men's behalves tbh. Story 60. Correct each other's language. My parents speak different languages. They learned each other's language. My brother and I were raised bilingual. Apparently it's not common for children to correct adults on grammar pronunciation. It had become totally normal for us. My brother and I would always correct our parents in their non-native language. Our parents corrected us constantly too. My parents also always corrected each other. My brother and I pissed off so many teachers that would teach our mom's language second language in school, and many random adults or peers. It took a while, but eventually I managed to correct others only using my brain voice and not my mouth voice. LOL. When I get comfortable with someone it tends to slip, but all my friends know that's just a quirk I have now and never take it personally. Story 61. Open marriages. I thought everyone lived like that because everyone we knew did. When I got older I realized everyone did because we only associated with like-minded families. We moved back to our hometown and was barely a teen when I found out that we were the weird ones. Oops. Story 62. I was gonna say using dad's chew cans for everything, since it weirded out people that little kids were carrying them around as a coin bag. This thread is so depressing. I'm gonna text my dad on my lunch break to thank him for being amazing. God dang.